Come on. Woo, what a bruiser. Drag snatcher here. Ooh, this guy is a beauty. This guy's got to be 26. What a freaking bruiser, y'all, on the kicker crab. Let's go. Beautiful fish right here, y'all. This guy has been eating good. Look at there, kicker crab right there in his mouth. Let's go. Beautiful fish. Get this guy measured, picture, and we'll send him on back.
What's going on, Salt Strong Nation? It's Matt and the Yak, and I've recently been getting some questions about one of the lures that I use and been having some really solid success with lately. So I wanted to go ahead and take this opportunity to kind of answer some of those questions from our insider members, as well as talk to you guys about when I like to use this and how I like to rig it. And the lure I'm actually talking about is the kicker crab from Z-Man, and it's actually been one of my really productive lures lately. This is the Z-Man package right here for their kicker crabs, and I've actually been having a lot of success catching some really nice redfish and trout on this, and I actually want to share with you guys how I've been so successful, where I like to use it, and how I like to rig it. So let's just go ahead and jump on in right now. Okay, so first off, what is a kicker crab? A kicker crab is a crab imitation lure, as you guys can see right here. It's got this pendulum swinging claw right here, and actually it's from Z-Man. This is made out of their Elastec plastic. These kicker crabs even won best of their category at ICAST in 2022. They were actually considered the best new introductory soft plastic, and our head of tackle, main man, Justin Ritchie, was actually able to catch up with them and get some information about the build and design of this. We'll actually go ahead and link that video down below as well if you want to get more information on what actually the kicker crab is. And this stuff is actually crazy durable. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this stuff, but it's super durable. And this crab imitation right here, I've actually been using it a lot lately to catch a bunch of really nice redfish and trout. And it's been one of my favorite lures when I'm needing to work the bottom in kind of a finesse presentation or more of a slow presentation. So I've actually been using these a lot lately and having some really solid success. So but as I said, they are super durable, and they are super stretchy, as you guys can see, and that allows them to be super durable so that you can actually catch a lot of fish with just one bait. These don't tear up super easy, and they're not as susceptible to getting torn up by, say, pufferfish or other toothy critters as well. Now, let's talk about when you may want to use one of these kicker crabs, okay? So one cool thing about these kicker crabs right here is that real crabs are actually everywhere. So a kicker crab can be used anytime, anywhere. So that's one of the great things about this bait right here. You can actually throw this year round, no matter what time of year. This will work for you, and actually how you work it may depend on the time of year along with the way you rig it. But before we get into that, I do want to mention a couple of my favorite places to throw a kicker crab. As I mentioned, I like to throw these around oyster bars when I'm trying to work really slow and that incoming tide is coming over those oyster bars that may have been exposed at low tide. And I know those redfish will like to push in around those oyster bars as that water allows. So when that water level starts to rise and those fish can push into those areas where those oyster bars are, they're often searching for crustaceans, as that's what they're usually foraging around those oyster bars. And a kicker crab right here is actually a great presentation to use because that's typically the type of bait that they're foraging for. They're looking for that bait fish or those crustaceans that are hanging around those oyster bars and providing an easy meal. Now, one of the other places that I like to throw these kicker crabs is around grass lines. As you know, we have a high tide or a incoming tide situation and the water level rises around those grass lines. You can throw a kicker crab around there because that's usually where these redfish will cruise looking for a meal when that tide comes to come in. And as I said, depending on how you rig it can often depend on how you work this bait and how it is presented in the water column. So let's go ahead and jump in with a couple of the ways that I like to rig this kicker crab right here. All right, Salt Strong Nation, so we're going to go ahead and cover a few of the ways that you can rig these kicker crabs right here. This example I have right here is their color option called the deal. So just to know, again, there are many color options, but this is just the one I have here. As you saw in the earlier part of this video, I had this rigged up on a Texas-eyed jig head from Ice Strike, and that's what I'll just go ahead and start with to show you guys one way to rig this up. One thing I will point out about these hook options is they have these nose keep right here. If you guys look really close right there, you can see that that right there is actually put on the front to actually help this bait stay up there and not slide down this hook shank. So just to go ahead and dive on in with how we're gonna rig this up, we're gonna hold it nose point up. We're gonna take our hook point and push it right through the tip there. And as you push it in, you're gonna be able to feel a little pop. And once you feel that pop, go ahead and turn the hook point towards the belly and push it out. Now slide this bait all the way down towards that nose keep that we just talked about. Now, if you do this from the bottom side first and slowly pull it over, you'll feel it pop to that little elbow joint that's right there at the front of that hook. Now, once you get it there, you'll spin your hook over. And once you get here, you'll go ahead and measure where that hook point should go in through the belly. Now, if you guys look right here, these Z-Man Kicker CrabZ, they have this really nice keel right there in the middle of the belly. Now, that's designed to help this thing stay straight when it's in the water. Now, it's also really helpful when you go to line up the bait. You'll know that center. So again, we'll see that it should come that far back. So we'll measure it with our finger there, put our finger where we know the bait should be. We'll put our hook point there where we measured, and we'll push it all the way through the belly to come straight out the back right there in that center line. Give it a tug there, and we know that that bait is on that hook, ready to go. That's a perfectly rigged kicker crab on a Texas-eyed jig head right there. Now, one thing I do want to point out about these Texas-eyed jig heads is they are super helpful for working the bottom part of the water column. If I want to work the bottom, I like to go to one of these jig heads that keep the weight front-ended, and it allows this bait to float with the claw end up. Now, if you guys paid attention here, you see I do have a couple different Ice Strike Texas-eyed jig heads here in front of me. Now, these are both the same size hook, but what you'll notice is I have a different eye color on this. This is the pearl and this is the bronze color there. The reason I have two different colored eyes right there, this is a bit of a pro tip for you guys, is this is the 3/16 option, this is the 1/8 ounce option. The reason I have them as different colored eyes is not because I believe one works better than the other, but because when I'm reaching in my tackle box and I need to find one or the other quickly, either a 3/16 or a 1/8 ounce, I don't have to try and figure it out. I just know I have to look for the different eye color so I know which weight I'm actually grabbing based on the eye color of the jig head. So I wanted to be able to share that little bit of a pro tip with you guys, but this is a great option to be able to rig these with. Now, moving along, you do have the option of also using the Haas weedless football jig heads. They do work great as well. I've actually been doing some testing with these to see if it would make a huge difference to be able to use these hooks, and it does not. Even though they don't have that nose keep right there, unless you're catching an elaborate amount of fish throughout one day, it's not going to make a huge difference while you're casting or anything. Now, when you do get a bite from a fish, it may slide down there, but that's after a bite and usually after hook set in my experience. So it hasn't really inhibited me from catching fish, but you do rig these up much of the same way. You'll send it through the nose there and you'll pull the bait up to the top, and it's a little bit easier to get over that elbow joint because you don't have that nose keep. And again, you'll measure where that hook should go in. It should go in about right there, as you guys can see. So I measured it out with my finger there. I'll bend the bait, push that hook point up through the belly, out the back in the center, give that bait a nice pop there, and it's ready to rock on a Haas football jig head. Now, another option for rigging up these kicker crabs are weighted hooks. If you guys look over here, I do have some Mustad grip pins, but Z-Man also has a Chinlock Z version, which is essentially the same thing as this Mustad grip pin. It is a weighted hook with a nose keep right there up on the elbow joint there, and these are rigged a little bit differently, but much of the same way. You'll actually send that hook point back through the tip of the bait there, and we'll make sure we're coming out the center there on the bottom part. We'll send that bait up, and once we get here to this weighted part, we'll have to go ahead and be gentle, but we slide that on down and over that weight. Now you get there to the nose keep, and again you slide it up over that nose, and you'll measure these out. Now these hooks do extend a little bit further, so we'll have to pay attention, mark with our finger there. Once we figure out where it should go in, we'll make sure we send it up through the belly, out the back, in the center of that bait. So now you have a perfectly rigged kicker crab on a weighted hook. Now, one thing I will mention is that these weighted hooks, these Mustad grip pins, they do come in a couple different options. They come weighted as well as unweighted, like you see right here. Now, these unweighted options are great for working the top of the water column. Now, if you're trying to work top water or even 6 inches or so deep, these are a great option for doing that. Now, these weighted hook options are great for working 1 to 2 foot, and if you have a heavier weight there, you could even go a little bit deeper, but these allow you to work these in a more flat presentation rather than vertical or on a more angled presentation like those jig heads would have them. But these right here, both weighted and unweighted, are a great way to work that water column in the suspended area, both top as well as mid water column. So in conclusion, for working the depths, the deeper parts of the water column, you could use one of these jig head options with a free swinging jig head at the top. Those are always great for working on the bottom in a more arched or angled presentation. But if you want to work in a horizontal presentation, whether that be mid column or up near the top of the surface, you could go with a Mustad grip pin, whether that be weighted or unweighted, as well as the Z-Man Chinlock Z. Those are all great options to use. All right, Salt Strong Nation, welcome back. Now let's talk about some of the pros and the cons of, say, these kicker crabs right here. I do want to be completely transparent. As you guys know, we are not sponsored or paid for any reviews, so I do want to be completely honest about these kicker crabs. So as I highlight these pros, I will talk about some of the cons as well. Now, as I said, some of the pros are that these things are super stretchy, they're super durable, and they're not as likely to get torn up by those toothy critters. It is a great bait with a great presentation, and it comes in a lot of different colors. I will say, when it comes to color, just throw what you're comfortable using. With these baits, I feel like it's more about the actual style of presentation with these baits rather than the actual color. These baits, because of their buoyant properties, they do sit upright. Because of their buoyant properties, this claw right here will actually sit upright in the water. That's one of the reasons I really like using this bait right here to work the bottom, because I know that this claw right here will allow some of this bait to stay free floating in the water column and put off some vibration as it stands up. Another pro is that it can be rigged a lot of different ways. As we talked about, you could rig this like I have right here with a Texas-eye jig head. You could rig it with a Haas football jig head. You could rig it with a weighted hook, whether that be to work mid-column or to even work the top water. As I've said, I've had some solid success with these, working the top part of that water column. During the summer, I was actually fishing a floating grass mat and used a kicker crab to actually get on top of that grass mat and draw those fish out and actually catch a couple really nice redfish. So the fact that these can be rigged a few different ways is also another advantage to these baits. Now, just to talk about some of the cons, one thing I will talk about is, even though these baits have this really nice keel right here on the underbelly that keeps it straight underwater, when you actually cast these, they are often sometimes unpredictable in the trajectory in which they're going, because they're not very aerodynamic. So you can often intend to cast one direction and this bait actually go in a different. So that is one of the cons about these baits. Another con is that these baits often require special rigging or special hooks. Because of these baits being so durable and so stretchy, they actually have to be rigged up, usually with a different hook, as you'll see here with that Texas side jig head, and we talked about in the rigging. It does have that little nose grip right there. Chin locks have it as well from Z-Man, and that's just to ensure that those baits do stay up on the top of that hook and don't slide down. Now, another con, which was also a pro, is that these baits are super buoyant. As we said, they do have a tendency to float if they're not weighted. So with that being said, you often have to use a heavier weighted jig head to ensure that you can get this bait to the bottom in some of those shallow water conditions. So if you have to use a heavier jig head to get this bait down deeper faster, then that could often mean that you have a bigger splash when this bait hits the water. That could be a bad thing if you're doing some sight fishing and trying to place your bait specifically on target, and when you're not trying to make a big splash with that bait as it breaks the surface, because if it breaks the surface, creates a big splash, it could spook those fish. So having to use those heavier weighted hooks or jig heads could be a con to this bait as well. So in conclusion, this is actually a great bait. I enjoy throwing this bait around those oyster bars and those grass lines, like I said, because if I'm throwing it on a weedless presentation, I know I can work mid-water column, top water if it's light enough, and especially the bottom if I allow it to get down there deep enough. So this bait is super versatile and it can be used anywhere at any time. Now, we do have these available in our tackle shop at fishstrong.com, and if you're an insider member, you do get amazing discounts on your tackle in our tackle shop. Now, again, I did mention earlier about color choice. I said color choice doesn't so much matter. Use what you think would look appropriate in your area, but keep this in mind. If you are doing some sight fishing with these and you want to be able to see your lure, you should probably go with a lighter colored option like the Slam Shady color. That's going to be a lot easier to see if you're trying to present this in front of a specific target, and it'll be easier for both you and the fish to see. Now, you insiders have actually seen that I talk about this kicker crab in our negative tide mini course, and I talk about how I like to work this bait. So I'm not going to dive too much into that, but we will link that negative tide mini course down in the description as well. So if you guys want to pick up any of the tackle used in this video or talked about, we'll leave those down in the description area. And if you have any questions or comments for me, leave those down there as well, as we always love hearing from you guys. Until next time, we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next video.